everyone. It's 7 a.m., August 29th, 2018. We'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Weaver is absent. Thompson.
Here.
Arneson.
Here.
Speedo's absent. Hicks.
Him.
Crawford.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Rachel.
Here.
We have a quorum. First item of discussion this morning is an NP Park stormwater analysis, and I'll call on our city engineer, Brian Uvaro.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, Your Honor, and members of the council committee. Before you is a proposal request in regards to NP Park stormwater management analysis. As we know, NP Park serves the community not only as a general gathering place, but also recreation. But it also serves as an auxiliary stormwater pond during significant stormfall events. This is most noticeable, like I mentioned, during significant events, and generally this runoff is retained on this park and everything, and it oftentimes leads to an undesirable residuals remaining throughout the inundation area that we're all kind of aware of. It is also known that during similar events, stormwater does accumulate on Cascade Street, and at times it encroaches onto the library property. I want to note, as I noted in this car, I don't have any record of any property damage, but it also is of concern at what elevations those waters can reach. Just recently, representatives from Noon Kiwanis have approached us city staff to discuss the potential to add or replace playground equipment. That's to be determined. Representatives are here to talk about what their preliminary plans are. During these discussions, we talked about the stormwater system and vice versa, how the runoff, how these two could relate throughout this playground area if modifications were made to this area, such as elevation differences, size, layout, and everything. Those are some things that we need to contemplate if we consider any modifications in this pond. One thing that was noted, though, we would like to look at, if any potential was to come forward, we'd like to look at some ADA improvements to this park. There's not a lot of accessibility. So I believe, construction, with this being said, and the construction of a new library, I believe it's important to review this matter alone. And finally, as I mentioned, NP Park is an ancillary component of the storm sewer network that serves a large watershed area. It's also unknown where the existing system constraints might occur, whereas future improvements to either upstream or downstream could help mitigate the potential flooding that happens in this park. That's during public improvements. If we know the issues in future, we could look to implement some of these improvements, but that's also to be determined. So at this time, I'll be requesting, but I'm going to turn it over to some representatives just to speak a little bit more of some potential modifications, enhancements they'd like to make to the park. But I've procured a professional services agreement for Moore Engineering to do the stormwater analysis. I think this is the founding basis to start to understand what's going on. This consists of doing some stormwater modeling in the park and to identify some potential impacts if we do want to make some modifications. They propose doing this in amount about $19,500. I believe it's reasonable, and I'm recommending this be funded through the Storm Sewer Enterprise Fund and supplemented through the library expansion project as well. So at this time, I'll turn it over to either
Steve Fergus and Sarah Duffy are here this morning. Welcome.
Perfect. Good morning. I'm Sarah Duffy, and I'm with Fergus Falls Noon Kiwanis.
I'm Steve Fergus.
And we, as you may know, Fergus Falls Noon Kiwanis, we sponsor NP Park, and we put in that orange and blue playground equipment over 10 years ago. And we've been looking at, after we completed our Lake Alice project, having another signature project. And NP Park kind of looks like our next big signature project that we're looking at doing. With that, we don't want to put a lot of money into playground equipment if it's going to be flooded. We also want the park to be accessible to kids with disabilities. I may be mistaken, but they're outside of the public schools. The parks in Fergus Falls are not accessible to kids with disabilities. And the company, we'll show you a video in a little bit, but the company that we're looking at, they specialize in kind of outside the box playground equipment. It's not your run-of-the-mill playground equipment. And particularly, they specialize in inclusive play for kids with disabilities. And so what our vision for the park is, and this is bigger than Noon Kiwanis, but what our vision for the park is to, with the library renovation, to have NP Park in that area be a central location for families to come and spend an afternoon with the hospital there and Otter Tail Power, and it's just a very central location to the river and to downtown, and goes with kind of the development that Fergus Falls is going with. So we're looking at, we've been in touch with other service groups, other businesses, private donors. We have interest. We would look to the city to partner with us in that project. Like I said, we want to make it accessible, and we don't want to put a lot of money into a playground that floods. And there's also health issues with that, with kids playing, you know, in the dirt there after the flooding goes away and that stormwater goes away. So what this, we support, we can't really move forward with our plans until this stormwater study is done, because what we would propose is that if we do that, move forward with our park, that the park would be raised up. That where the outline of the park is right now would be raised up level, so it's accessible and it would not flood.
Do you mind just hitting play on that? This is just a video of a company that we're hoping to work with. And as you can see, this is a park in Maple Grove that fabulous park. But we aren't looking to do a carbon copy of this, but this is more just to show you.
Well, I think the playground is really fun, and I love there's a variety of different things for the kids to do and to play on, and have all different age groups.
It's very unique playground. It's very interactive and
Different than other places around.
Different, and being able to play with the kids too with the swings and the slides and everything is important as well.
How cool is it?
We would, next steps would, they're really into creating playgrounds specific to a town, and so we're not gonna, you know, put a piece of playground equipment, just a piece of playground equipment. They kind of model it after, they want it to be a Fergus Falls park. So that, you know, along with that, we would go down there and work with their designers, and they would design a park specifically for Fergus Falls and make it our park, so.
Yep. And then, you know, as far as fundraising goes, I mean, we were hoping, we've met with Mayor Shire and Andrew and Brian several times about how we would be able to partner with the city. You know, we would do a lot with it. Fundraising is not in our opinion a concern. I mean, there's a lot of grant money and companies that are willing to work with us, and you know, the organizations we've talked to, like Sarah said, have really supported this project, especially with that new library coming up. And so that's what's in our way is this water study, really. Just being able to, if we know if this is even a possibility, then we can move forward with some designs and things like that, and come back to the city with a later proposal for funding and how we can partner. So.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Sarah. And just to note too, talking with Brian, that this water study has been in a desired study for a number of years. It's something that what Dan Edwards had wanted to do for a number of years too. So, sounds to me like time is now. It's a good time to do it with the library project. And, like I said, it's funded out of the stormwater fund, Brian, and also part of it out of the.
Yeah, I believe
library
don't have the exact matrix breakdown right now. I figured doing the study and everything, but proposing stormwater fund in conjunction with the library as benefiting from the study.
Thanks, Brian. Yes, Anthony.
Where does the water go? I mean, does it just naturally drain now, or is there actually a drain that takes it to the stormwater system onto the river?
I believe there's a partial underdrain system connected to the storm sewer. It's kind of, we call it bouncing.
Right.
And then it'll go back into the storm sewer system and eventually move east and then towards the river, then conveyed into the river. So it does provide some water quality improvements as well right now.
Right.
Yes, Jim.
Brian, will you have the walkway like you have now? We have a lot of walk of flags out there.
That's very good. That's something we got to look at, because the Lions Club and also the restroom. So if we do modifications, we got to take those all in considerations. Possibly doing some levees or remove and reinstall. There's a few other things we got to take in consideration here as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's as part of the plan for just the playground if we do those.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, is there someone?
I would make the motion that we go ahead with the study and make it comprehensive enough that we cover, as you say, the restrooms and the walkways, as well as the playground.
I'll move that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Justin. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Brian. Thank you,
Put
Steve.
it on the
Thank you, sir.
consent agenda.
Consent agenda is fine with everyone? All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is an easement request for 645 West Fur Avenue. And again, I'll call on Brian Uvaro.
Thank you. Excuse me, the owner of 645 West Fur Avenue that's located within the city is requesting, and I'm going to amend myself right now, an easement, but the permission to encroach on city property to construct a subsurface sewer treatment system that would serve this particular property. A portion of the property that they're looking to encroach is on Noyes Park. If you in your packet, you're going to see an exhibit outlining the potential impact area to construct this privately held system. In general, the city's policy requires, parcels such as this with these individual subsurface treatment systems to connect to the existing sewer. Once a useful life or the terms of the deferred assessment has been reached. This particular property is a little unique because we don't have the infrastructure nearby or adjacent to connect, and I don't foresee that occurring relatively in the near future because there is some easements that would have to be procured and everything as well. So with that being said, I'm requesting that this be considered. I've consulted with the park department in this matter too. They have no exception, but they're requesting this be restored with native grasses and plants with a high concentration of pollinators. That can be conveyed to the owner and everything, and I believe that's a very reasonable request. But my recommendation, I'm going to amend that. I had a little oversight on it. I spoke with our city attorney and we concur. But the requested action is requesting a motion to be made to place this item on the consent agenda and direct the city attorney and myself to develop an encroachment agreement that would be consistent with this type of effort for the septic system. The encroachment agreement could be tailored in a manner for 20 years, or we need to define that it's not perpetuity, but it's consistent with what type of the septic system use that we're looking at. So,
Any questions for Brian? Scott?
I'll bring that.
Thank you. Pat? Second. Brent? Any further?
I just add that we included the restore, obviously, in that agreement.
Yes.
We include the
yes,
restoration.
that's typical, and that's a very good point.
Thank you.
Restoration.
Thank you, Anthony. Any other discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries, and I think that can go on the consent agenda as well. Thanks. Item number 3 is a turf roadside study. Once again, Brian Uvaro.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. The card before you is just in general, I want to provide some information and just some consents to the project. Recently, representatives from the U of M Department of Horticulture contacted me about the potential. They've identified the city of Fergus Falls as one of the regions within the state to do a roadside seed study. There's a few criteria that they've established. They're looking for generally like a 700-foot area by 10 foot that's adjacent to curb and gutter and approximately 5-foot setback from that adjacent curb. They've actually identified a particular location. If you look in the memo there, they identified a strip of right-of-way that's generally located along Fur Avenue north of the Broadway Street intersection. This appears to meet their criteria. I've spoken with the Otter Tail County as well about this project, and I've also provided some supplementary information about this program in general. The impetus, what we believe, what I understand and everything, like I said, this is new, but it's not really new to the state. They're trying to enhance the salt-resistant roadside turf for our region and other regions within the state. Some of the deliverables will include optimization of seed mixtures, what mixtures can best maintain vegetative cover to reduce overall soil erosion, which is an important thing, and selecting better adapted grasses for these particular regions and thereby reducing annual maintenance costs. Other than the land is what the U of M representatives are requesting is that they would rent a hydrant meter and reimburse the city for water use. That's generally within the first 60 days of start of this program. The reason I'm would like this council's consent. This program, you know, if you look through some of the information, it would last through the next year and ultimately be ending in the spring of 2020, where the site, if approved, would be restored to its natural existing presence. So at this time, I was just requesting actually some consent to this project.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Brian? If not, is there someone who'd like to offer this to bring this to the council?
I'll offer, Your Honor.
Justin, thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Darren. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Brian. Item number 4 on the agenda is a Glacial Edge Trail Demonstration Project update, and I'll call on Ryan Miller.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, members of the council. I have an update on a project that we're working on related to the Glacial Edge Trail. I have a map up here of the route that I'll be talking about. So if you remember, back in January of this year, the city did submit an application to the Transportation Alternatives federal grant for the Glacial Edge Trail for a route larger than what you see on the map here. It was for the section from Veterans Park all the way down to the end of the Central Lakes Trail. And that application would have paid for improvements to the trail along Pebble Lake Road connecting out to Central Lakes Trail, but also to do some on-road bike infrastructure, so bike lanes and delineators along the on-road portions kind of between where Pebble Lake Road turns into Vernon, from there all the way into Veterans Park. Ultimately, the city was unsuccessful with that first grant application, and some of the feedback from that declined grant application was that additional vetting and design and engineering of the trail route was needed. So at that point, staff began putting together a possible demonstration project of the on-road portions of that trail section. And so back in July and August, I've been meeting with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Council and Fergus Falls to look through the route and get some ideas on putting together a temporary bike lane, which is what you see on the map here. It would be from Adams Park all the way to Veterans Park, running along Burlington, Washington, then onto Sheridan for a portion, and then Lincoln Avenue into Veterans Park. The idea would be to do, so it's two one-way bike lanes on the west side of the road section, so it'd be 8 feet of bike lanes with two-way lanes, and then an additional 1 foot buffer, and then protective bollards on the inside of the roadway between the bike lanes and the adjacent traffic lane. The city did procure temporary bollards through the remainder of a grant from Blue Cross Blue Shield. We received a grant from Blue Cross Blue Shield to do some downtown demonstration projects last year during Shop Move and Groove. We had some balance to that grant, so we purchased 60 temporary bollards. They're 3-foot plastic bollards with a 12-foot rubber base. They're movable and they would not be permanently placed in the roadway. They're just movable bollards that we would put along the edge of the bike lane. And we hope to get this out sometime, hopefully mid-September. There's a couple of events that we'd like to include within the time frame of this demonstration project. It'd just be about a 2 to 3 week window where we'd have these out. And we're thinking mid-September through early October to incorporate Bike Your Park Day on September 29th and Trail Fest on October 6th. I have, like I mentioned, gotten some input from Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and Fergus Falls have also notified police department and fire department for any impacts to the roadway that they would possibly deal with for those couple weeks. But this is really just an informational kind of update. There's no request, but I would certainly welcome any questions on the project.
So, Ryan, you said that it's 2 bike lanes go on the west side of the road, so does it change stripe, I mean, does it change traffic flow and, I mean, striping, or does it just take a parking lane basically?
It would, yes, that's one thing I didn't mention. There would be parking elimination for the couple weeks that the temporary
And
lanes
they're
are
both
out.
on the same side, you mentioned on the west side of the
On
street?
just one side of the street. So I've also talked with Brian and Guy about any effects to the roadways and parking and things, and so it would impact parking on the west/south side of
Sure.
those roadways. There's a very small amount of parking issues there. There's a couple businesses that may have some employees park on the street, but they have 2 streets kind of on the corner of Sheridan and Hampton. There's a business on the corner of Sheridan and Junius. So there's other parking options on adjacent streets as well. But there would be some parking.
Is a 2-week period straight, like 2 weeks?
2 to 3 weeks. I haven't set the dates yet. There is a possible water main repair project on the corner of Washington and Sheridan, right, Brian? And that could be coming up in a couple weeks to a month, so I'm kind of listening for those dates of those construction to not interfere with that before I decide a final date for this. But yeah, 2 to 3 weeks, but I'd like to include those events in late September and early October for better use of the bike lanes.
Any questions, Ryan, Anthony?
I think it would only be fair that we notify the residents and the business owners if we're gonna do this, because even, you know, and to let them know that it's only temporary, but I think it's gonna, if we just put the bollards out there, it's gonna be inconvenient for people, and then we're gonna get kind of, obviously, negative feedback from what you're trying to do as a positive.
Thank you. Yeah, I plan to send out letters to all of the property owners, and then once I get a date set, I'll walk the path as well and talk face to face and let them know the dates and what I plan to do, and then it's
And that it's
temporary.
not a permanent thing.
Right.
Sure, I think that's
Good idea.
important, if you actually walk the route, that's.
There is just a few, I just looked on the map, there's a few businesses I think that you can see on the map, there's cars parked in front of them now that would, you know, affect them, but mostly it's not, Wiesner's I think is one of them, and then, Casey's. And what's the other, that's about it really, I mean, it's, nobody else parks on Sheridan and turns into Lincoln, so I don't think it's really a, but you can talk to them.
All right, any other questions, thoughts? We have a motion to bring this to the council on, this is information.
Just information, there's no request needed.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Next item is a recommendation to the council to approve signing a matching grant from the Minnesota DNR. I'll call on Fire Chief Ryan Muckow.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So back in April, it seemed like a long time ago, we did submit to the volunteer fire department assistance grant with the DNR, and we just received last week the award that we were accepted with it, and if we so choose or is accepted to sign into it, it's a $4,500 or roughly $4,500 matching grant. So whatever we spend, we'll get back up to $4,500. And what we submitted for was lighter weight helmets for when we're out in our rural protection areas for wildland fires, and then also the replacement of our 3-inch fire hose, which is used mostly in town, but can be used out in the rural areas for longer hose lays down driveways. So we're fortunate that we're able to apply for the grant just because of the rural contracts that we do provide. So the city as a whole, we have too much of a population, but it was pretty nice. It was a competitive process, and we came out almost to the maximum amount that we could get with this grant, which is $5,000. So I felt pretty excited that when we got the letter, and so I guess in a sense we'd be looking to see if approval by the council for us to sign the agreement with them and move forward with some purchasing. So.
And pardon me, Ryan, the match is within your existing budget?
It is, yep. And it's a fiscal year 2019 for the state, so if something does come up to where we can't necessarily get the match for this year, because if something comes up with a bigger expense, we can still use it in our 2019 budget.
Sure.
So we have some flexibility there.
I will offer that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jim.
Second it.
Thank you, Brent. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Consent.
Consent agenda, yeah. Let's see. Additional agenda items, you got number one?
Sure.
Well, first item on the agenda is just a city project update. I'll call on Andrew Bremseth.
Yeah, good morning, Your Honor, members. We're going to make it a habit to include a city project list in your packet on the second or the final committee of the whole meeting each month. And we do take time to update that, so you'll notice differences throughout from month to month. And that'll be in your packets. It was in there this time, and if you guys have any specific questions, staff would be glad to entertain those. Otherwise, we feel it's a good tool to show you, one, not only all the things that are going on, but all the different things that are also moving forward throughout each given month. So we're not going to hone in on any specific project unless there's questions, but just know that that's something that we'll be providing to the committee at the end of the month every month.
Thank you. Andrew, any questions on that? If not, we'll move on to item number 2, a housing task force update. I'll call on Amy Baldwin.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. I just wanted to provide a quick update on the work that the Housing Task Force has been working on over the last month. As you recall, back in May, we hosted a workshop of a wide range of stakeholders to talk about the topic of what do we need to do in Fergus Falls to ensure we have the appropriate supply and quality of housing to meet our needs today and going forward. So from that task force, or from that workshop, a task force was authorized and formed via the City Council. And that group has met 3 times now. They met in July and then twice in August. At the first meeting in July, we reviewed about what is the work of the task force, what is the primary goal, which is to create those specific recommendations around improving the supply and quality of housing. They made a commitment to meet for approximately 4 months, 1 to 2 times per month, depending on the schedule. And we overviewed the topics, and I'll just walk through those primary topics that the task force either has covered or will be covering going into the future. At the front end, we talked about understanding the demographics of our community and the current housing supplies. And there was a lot of discussion about understanding affordability and what do typical jobs, entry-level jobs at our healthcare providers or at our manufacturers, and what would that allow a single wage earner to afford and not be cost burdened. And that was very eye-opening to the group, and as well, I think to the group definitely, and some of the employers in the group, on when they're hiring somebody at an entry level, that there really isn't a for sale product that a single family home anyway that their employee would be able to afford as a single wage earner. So just understanding that and the need for even the types of rental housing that we have to meet the needs of people who may be in those entry level jobs, even outside of our manufacturing and healthcare, if we're thinking about our food service and areas like that, how can we best meet the needs of those folks? During this time, there's been also the Governor's Task Force on Housing has released their recommendations on housing, and the topics that they highlighted and some key recommendations are similar to the topics that this group is talking about. So we're right on track with those bigger issues, and it's the housing affordability issue is now really coming out as a crisis. There isn't a county in the state of Minnesota that a minimum wage earner can afford a 1-bedroom apartment without being cost burdened or very cost burdened in that. Which meaning they're paying probably over 50% of their income right into that part of their household expense. So it's a statewide issue. Hopefully these recommendations will drive some additional resources from a statewide level, but this group is really focused on looking at locally what can we do to create partnerships and resources that may not be available today. So after going through the demographics, and we also had a presentation from Ryan Hansen from Keller Williams, who is on the task force, but talked about the for sale inventory and what is happening with those days on market going down, asking prices rising, and again, just impacting that affordability. But the number of homes on market available is less than what you would want to see. We're seeing action. I mean, things are moving quickly for the most part, but we're just not seeing, we just don't have enough inventory for what buyers would like to see as far as a healthy for sale inventory is about 6 months on, for sale at any given time, and we're in more of that 3 to 4 month range. So just trying to increase availability in the right areas that people are looking for. So a lot of great information there. And then at the last meeting, we had a speaker from MMCDC, the Midwest Minnesota, Minnesota Community Development Corporation. Yeah, it could be a lot of acronyms. MMCDC out of Detroit Lakes. And they have done single family, specifically focusing on the single family partnerships that they've done in Detroit Lakes, Thief River Falls, and some other communities. And really looking at how that model could be brought to Fergus Falls with some different areas, focusing on the single family side. That's the area we haven't seen our inventory increase. We've really had a very low recovery from the downturn that we experienced around 10 years ago, whereas a lot of other communities in the research that we looked at did rebound and are in back to their numbers that they experienced pre-recession, and we just haven't bounced back in that single family construction new start perspective. So we got some great information, great dialogue with that group. I appreciated them coming down to our early meeting. We meet at 7:30 a.m. and they were gracious enough to come down and speak to us. Going forward, we will be looking at some additional models for partnership and development. There's 2 other counties in the state that we know of that we've spoken to about partnering with the county from a tax forfeit perspective. How can we get those parcels back into inventory and in production in a way that might support these goals that the task force is talking about. So we're having meetings with the county, HRA and the county themselves about what that might look like, and looking at these models that other counties have been using as a starting point. Also talking about ways to finance and offset some of the infrastructure costs to reduce those special assessments to home buyers and to the developers. And so thinking about different models and approaches that the task force will likely make some recommendations on how to support that angle of development as well. In October, we plan to focus more on the multifamily realm and some of the maintenance standards, and how do we ensure that we're maintaining a high quality of housing for all of our occupants in our residential units. So looking at that, and then again, the programs and resources that maybe could be brought to our community and highlighted more to support the housing inventory in the communities. So the task force will be wrapping up in November and plan to make a presentation at the second council meeting of their recommendations and final report. So we'll be back with another update. The Planning Commission does have a representative who has been actively serving on the task force, and the Planning Commission has been receiving updates at each of their meetings as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that task force's work.
Thank you, Amy. Does the council committee have any
I
questions?
do have one question on the financial side of it, where did they show like an intersection of where the pay has to be in order to get to that rent number, so it isn't at a 50% level or whatever the number is? Is there a graphic or some kind of number that they have to earn in order to get to the level of affordability?
Yep,
what that number would
there
be.
is a report which I'd be happy to send to the council or to you, Councilmember Appert, that is talking about the workforce housing crisis is how the word that they're using. But looking at the housing wage, and this is on a statewide level, so keeping that in mind, would be $14.82 per hour to afford a 1-bedroom apartment.
Does it give a value of rent for the 1-bedroom apartment?
The average rent, $771, I believe. Fair market. That's a fair market rent. So I'm not sure if that's not an average. That's
Any other questions?
Thanks.
Randy? Thank you. Look forward to the task force recommendations in November. Anything else to come before the council? One announcement, September 4th, of course, September 3rd is Labor Day, so all city facilities will be closed. Council meeting will be September 4th, and there's, at 4:30 on the 4th, there is a preliminary budget presentation by Bill Sonmore at 4:30, so we're all looking forward to that. Yes, Jim?
I have one thing. I had a complaint about the brush starting to grow up again around Lake Alice. If we could check on that. I know that a lot of that's wild grass and stuff in there, but some of that brush is starting to grow back up again, and I've had a complaint about it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
The other thing maybe just to mention is that obviously garbage on Monday will be Tuesday.
Yes.
And I'm assuming Tuesday will be Wednesday.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Messages going right now. Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, with that, we will be adjourned.
How did you?